Good morning. And thank you for being here. I'm joined this afternoon, by Maine Emergency Management Director Pete Rogers, Transportation Commissioner Bruce Van Note, there he is, and Public Safety Commissioner Mike Sawchuk, and General Douglas Farnham. Here's what we can report as of about an hour ago. There are about 253,182 total outages statewide, though this number remains fluid as power restoration continues. CMP has restored power to more than 200,000 of its customers, and it estimates that about 197,416 customers in its service area are still without power. Versant has restored power to more than 40,000 of its customers, and it estimates that about 52,186 customers in its service area are without power. May I just take a moment and remind you to please include Ms. Thibodeau in your camera view. Thank you. And Eastern Maine Electric estimates that about 3,580 of its customers are without power. I spoke yesterday with CMP President Joe Purington and Versant President John Flynn, and we talked about the utility's power restoration efforts. Each of them assured me they are drawing down all available resources to restore power in as timely manner as possible. And I have assured them, or offered them, the full weight of Maine state government, wherever possible, to help them accomplish that goal and get everybody's power restored. We had helicopters from the Maine Forest Service conducting general aerial assessments and helping CMP survey damage to the electric grid so that power can be restored more quickly. Even still, the extensive damage, excuse me, I don't know what that is, but the extensive damage caused by the storm means that we're continuing to look at a multi-day power restoration effort. Transportation Commissioner Van Note reported to me that the Maine Department of Transportation continues to assess and repair damage to Maine's roads and bridges as promptly as possible. And as of early this morning, I can report that MaineDOT has reopened more roads and bridges as floodwaters have receded. Right now, there are 68 state road closures, down from nearly 100 yesterday, as a result of downed trees and power lines and flooding and significant infrastructure damage. More than half of those road closures are in Oxford, Franklin, and Kennebec counties. Right now, MaineDOT continues to close 23 bridges, 6 of them because of damage to roads leading up to the bridges themselves. No actual bridges have collapsed due to the floodwaters, although the approaches to some have been badly damaged. As floodwaters recede, MaineDOT will continue to clear roadways of debris and assess damage and conduct repairs. However, flood warnings from the National Weather Service remain in effect in several areas, including the towns along the Kennebec and Androscoggin rivers, which are both experiencing high water levels, and while towns in other areas across Maine are grappling with the aftermath of flooding. I saw this flooding firsthand this morning in Augusta, where I joined Director of Kennebec County Emergency Management to survey damage. We expect water levels to drop in the coming hours and days, but water levels remain high and they continue to pose a serious risk in many areas of the state, particularly along the Kennebec and Androscoggin rivers. We will keep monitoring water levels closely, but I can't stress this enough. If you live in any area that is at risk of flooding or that has been hard hit by the storm, please stay off the roads as much as possible and stay away from flooded areas wherever you are, including flooded roadways. A road that you may be very familiar with that is now underwater may have a lot deeper water than you anticipate. We want you to be safe. And we want to allow first responders and restoration crews to be able to get out there and assess the damage and go forward with cleanup and restoration efforts quickly. To support response and recovery efforts, yesterday I declared a state of civil emergency for 14 counties across the state of Maine: Androscoggin, Aroostook, Franklin, Hancock, Kennebec, Knox, Lincoln, Oxford, Penobscot, Piscataquis, Saginaw, Somerset, Waldo, and Washington counties. Those are the counties hardest hit by this storm, although we're ready to help every county in need, of course. So this declaration of civil emergency formalizes our all-hands-on-deck approach, and it ensures that every state resource is available to towns across Maine that need assistance. And the declaration positions us to seek federal disaster support. In the coming days, Maine Emergency Management will be working with county emergency management people to assess the damage to our infrastructure. The Maine Department of Transportation will also work with the Federal Highway Administration. Rest assured, we will seek any and all federal financial assistance and support to help Maine people recover from this storm. I will also issue a proclamation that will enable a waiver from the U.S. Department of Transportation to allow fuel delivery personnel to drive additional hours to make sure that there's timely delivery of heating fuel. My administration has been and will continue to work around the clock, along with local public safety officials, county emergency management people, and CMP and Versant, to clear debris from roads, to assess and repair the damage caused by floodwaters, and to restore power to Maine people as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Maine DHHS will also be providing information about how SNAP recipients can replace food that's lost because of power outages or because of flooding or other stormwater damage. DHHS has continued to issue WIC benefits for parents, and it's working with water districts to assess public drinking water systems, and they're reaching out to all long-term care facilities to check on the safety of residents and staff. The department will provide more information on these efforts as soon as possible. As first responders and restoration crews work to assess the damage and make repairs, Maine people can do their part by being cautious and vigilant. I urge Maine people who live in hard-hit areas of our state to stay off the roads as much as possible, to stay away from flooded areas, including flooded roadways, and to heed the advice and warnings of your local county emergency officials. All of this will protect your safety and allow crews to move forward with their cleanup more quickly. Look, I understand how frustrating the situation can be and how tempting it may be to get back onto the road and try to continue life as normal. But please do not tempt fate. Going anywhere near downed power lines can be fatal, and driving through flooded roads can be very dangerous. If you need emergency assistance, you should call 911. If you need non-emergency assistance, like where to find a warming shelter or a charging center, call 211 or text your zip code to 898-211. Look, Maine people, we're no strangers to hard times. We've been through a lot lately, the last few years, a pandemic, a turbulent economy, the horrific tragedy in Lewiston, and now this devastating storm, which has claimed the lives of at least 2 people, with 2 others still missing. And it can't be ignored that this storm comes just days before Christmas, a time that's marked by joy and love and kindness. But for many in Maine, that may no longer be the case. People who are dealing with the loss of their homes or vehicles or damage to property. And in the face of these challenges, I'm reminded that we are never asked to carry more than we are able. I know that in Maine, that burden feels heavy right now, but it is not more than we can carry. And I'm reminded of our strength that show in the acts of kindness, of bravery, and compassion. What I have seen in the first responders who risked their own lives to rescue a stranded motorist, the community centers keeping their doors open so families can charge their phones and get warm, the linemen pushing past their own fatigue to bring the lights back on, the unshakable spirit and unbreakable strength of Maine people, the very best of our state. We have challenging days ahead, but we will get through this. Please keep the faith, and please stay safe. Thank you. And if there are questions.
Governor, have you considered calling up the National Guard at all?
Thank you. Been talking to General Farnham and county emergency management people. If there are specific needs that the Guard can help assess or respond to, that's a possibility. It hasn't as yet risen to that level yet.
Governor, we heard less from your administration ahead of the storm than we did about the weaker storm earlier in the month, and only a little from you personally until the declaration yesterday. I think a lot of us were caught off guard by the power of this storm. But do you think Mainers should be happy with the state's response here? And is this storm leading you to re-examine pre-storm communication and things like that?
That's a lengthy question. But look, we're as good as the weather reports, and we're as good as we prepare for every storm, for every emergency, the same way. And I think Pete will tell you how we prepared for this one. And were people knocked off guard a little bit by the storm the week before that caused people to be more prepared, perhaps? We've seen emergencies before where people ran to the hardware stores and the food stores and stocked up, and then the storm did not appear to amount to as much of an emergency as was predicted. That happens. The reverse can happen too, but we were prepared in the same respect as we're prepared for all emergencies. And maybe Pete can enlighten you about that, what steps you've taken. Excuse me.
As the governor said, we prepare for storms the same way every time. We start looking a week out when we start to see some sort of a disturbance. We track it through the week. As we get closer and the forecast narrows down, we reach out to National Weather Service. We also receive products from them called decision support briefs. This past storm, we were on top of it all week long, watching and listening to those folks. This past weekend, we reached out to National Weather Service, started to see that this was going to be impactful. So we had a conference call with our partners, to include county emergency management agencies, National Weather Service, the utilities, state agencies, to give everybody that same common operating picture, so they could ask questions, they could talk about it, they could see if there are any needs at that point. We decided to activate our Emergency Operations Center Monday morning at 06, and we did it that way to make sure that the staff was in the Operations Center prior to the storm becoming bad enough to keep people away. We had another follow-up conference call that day, mid-storm, to see where we are, what the damages were, what the needs were. Again, brief outs by National Weather Service, both Caribou and Gray, the utilities, all of those folks. So it's the same process we use every time. So our folks are ready to go. The counties are ready to go. Everybody's on the same sheet of music.
Pete, can you just address whether the utilities, were they as prepared for this particular storm as they were, say, for the hurricane that ended up hitting Nova Scotia back in, I think, September? I just remember a lot of staging of out-of-state utility trucks for that storm. I did not see that before this one, and I'm just wondering, do you have a sense from the utilities whether they ramped up and brought in out-of-state crews beforehand, or did those crews come later?
I do, Steve. We work with those folks through the weekend to actually facilitate a lot of the different crews coming in. They receive crews from Canada. They receive many crews from out of state. So probably the biggest response of other crews I've seen in quite a while, actually.
Before or after the storm?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you also speak about the lack of flood insurance in the state?
I cannot, but we can put you in touch with somebody that could.
What about should we expect stronger storms now and in the future?
I think what we're seeing now is the new norm. The days of single event storms where we have a snowstorm or we have a rainstorm, I think we're going to see multi-hazard events, unfortunately. We're seeing them quicker. They come out very fast. They come out very strong. So we're dealing with, instead of just one piece, we're dealing with snowstorms. We're dealing with winds. We're dealing with heavy rains, coastal flooding, beach erosion, all at the same time, which makes, obviously, the response more difficult.
How will the lessons learned from this storm impact your preparations for future storms?
We have after actions after every single event that we have. So we'll look at this, take a look and see if there are things that we can do better, things that we need to refine. We work with all of our partners in the response.
Governor, you mentioned water spigots, getting water to people without power in heavy hit areas. I met a man in Farmington who was at the fire station just searching for water. I don't know how many other people are in this situation. I know you mentioned it, in the beginning, but is there a clear way for people to find those resources, or could you elaborate on those efforts a little bit about getting people water with this multi-day effort to get power restored?
Sure. To extent people are out of power and don't have access to water, they can call 211 and be directed to a place near them where they can find water and food if necessary. The Red Cross has been a strong partner in this effort, and the county emergency management teams have been a very strong partner in this effort too. I would go to 211. I would go to the county emergency management facility in your area first. And I would just point out, in response to the previous question, the National Weather Service did not predict 5 or 6 inches of rain in any community in Maine. So it was an extraordinary event in that respect. The National Weather Service did not predict 68, 70 mile an hour winds in any area of Maine too. But I think we were as prepared as possible. It's the combination of the wind and the rain cause this to be a multi-hazard emergency of a different sort than we'd experienced in the past.
Governor, you mentioned in your emergency declaration that you'd be seeking all federal funds available. What are some of those that you have sought out so far?
Well, we haven't filed paperwork yet. We're still assessing and communicating with the county emergency management people who give us the information about the extent of damage to public infrastructure and the like, and the roads in different areas that we will put together to file with the federal DOT and the FEMA for appropriate sources of federal help.
Governor, maybe Peter, you might want to chime in on this too, but how are the utilities doing in your estimation? And I think that it's something that a lot of people are out there are thinking about, particularly as many don't have estimates for when power will come back on in their areas. I mean, what's your assessment of how they're doing right now?
Well, from talking with both John Flynn at Versant and Joe Purinton at CMP several times in the last few days, I think they're doing everything they can. I think it's the flooding obviously impeded their efforts to get to places. Assessing what trees were down where, what lines were down where is a much more complicated effort than anybody would have predicted, perhaps. But they did have crews on standby, and they've got people coming in from as far away as Ohio to help repair the lines. Monday, it was impossible to begin repairing lines. You couldn't get the buckets up to the poles. It would be hazardous to all the linemen, and that's not something we want to see. They can't go up in the buckets when it's 50, 60 mile an hour winds, obviously not. So, and now that more trees have come down Monday and Tuesday, they're doing a good job, I think, assessing what has to be done and getting out there and getting it done. It's going to be a multi-day process.
I have a safety question maybe for Commissioner Sawchuk. There are obviously a number of roads washed out and some water rescues that we've reported and others. Is there enough sort of like signage and communications to people who have to be out there traveling that, this road is flooding out? I mean, even where I live in Brunswick, there was a power line across the road near where I live, but there was no signs to let people know that the road was closed. And I just wonder what kind of coordinated effort is happening to tell people where there might be, danger ahead.
Yeah, what Bruce might want to respond as well.
Sure.
Mr. Rhodes.
Yeah, we coordinate with locals on all that. Signage was an issue in this storm. I mean, it was so widespread, we actually, in some places, ran out of signs in some things, but we coordinate with others that have them as soon as we can. That's a part of the after-action thing that we'll be looking at. I think all the, really dangerous places had signs. Obviously, you prioritize when you do that, but this was a widespread storm that wasn't fully forecast, and so we will adjust.
Well, let me just say, if you are driving, if you have to go out, and you're anywhere near pooled water or anywhere near, floodplain, what you know to be a floodplain, just don't go through it. We can't put out signs in front of every pocket of water that might cause either hydroplaning or stalling your car in deep water and potentially losing power of your car.
Time for one more.
Governor,
Hi.
considering the extent of this storm, will you have a dedicated task effort specifically for this damage, like you've done in some of the other things in the past?
I'm sorry, didn't hear the rest of the
So
question.
like you've done for some of the other emergencies in the past, will you have a specific task efforts dedicated to this, considering the damage of this storm?
Well, after any storm, we have a sort of not only a debriefing, but an assessment of what the response was and what the damage was totally, and also part of our efforts to obtain federal resources and federal help. We'll be doing that, compiling the data, compiling the information about what response was needed where and how people did at the local and state level.
Governor, do you think this will be the most expensive natural disaster in our state's history, would you say? Or
Expensive?
Expensive.
I don't have a way of telling you that, but...
Governor, have
Thanks,
you spoken
everyone.
to the president?
What?
Have you spoken to the president?
No, I have not.
Why did it take us so long to hear from you? Why are we hearing from you Wednesday and not Monday night or Tuesday during the day?
We were in an emergency status. I mean, We issued press releases. I was busy on the phone and on Zoom with these good people and others most of the day yesterday and much of the day Monday. I was in the office helping do the assessments that we're all talking about.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This is your pen, Bruce. Thank you, Reagan.
Provided by Maine Public Member Contributions and by...
Dad, please don't play those old Christmas songs again.
The best way to spread Christmas cheer is to play loud enough.